right, hello everybody. Welcome to, episode 2. We made it past one episode, the very first episode of the V100 show. No, we're on to episode 2. This is it's done a bit differently. It's not your standard sort of Veeam show that you normally will see from us. It's a show where we're highlighting our brilliant community, a lot of the great tech and innovation in our community, that being the vanguards, the legends, and the MVPs, and what they bring to this great world of technology that Veeam software lives in. So today, we're lucky to have two of our best on the show. We've got Ben Young and Kristof Poppe. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hello, thank you. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Excellent. I almost feel like, Ben, I went the hat just to try and match your backwards cap, but I think if I take my glasses off, that looks a little bit more,
You got to turn it backwards.
Like I'm supporting the thing. Yeah. I don't want to go full backwards and full community like you, but I'm supporting our Caston.io friends. Michael K will be happy with that because at the moment he's not too happy with me for various reasons, but we won't go into that. We're still friends. But yeah, let's get on to the show. And guys, obviously last week, the last show actually, which wasn't last week, was a couple of weeks ago. We talked about what the show was all about. It's really about highlighting you and what you've done, your journey in the community. And then at the end of the show, we're going to show you some really cool tech that you guys have been working on for the best part of this year and a bit longer, based all on this crazy thing that hasn't got much of a look in this year called generative AI. Okay, so no one knows what that's all about this year, right? This has definitely been the year of Gen AI and security. But definitely Gen AI is where it's at for me. It's a lot more fun, and I'm really excited to see what you guys are doing. So before we get into it, I think I want to just get a little bit of an understanding, like we did in the last show, just a journey to talk. So Ben, take us through your journey from a community perspective, right? This is all about the community. So, give a little bit about where you've worked, your background, and how you really became what I think is one of the most foremost technologists in the space around Veeam.
Yeah. So, my journey started with the Veeam community about 4 or 5 years ago. So I've been a Vanguard now for 4 years, which is pretty neat. Couldn't have asked for much a better kind of community program to be a part of. But yeah, rewinding a bit further back from that, I have a background in software engineering. And much like you, Anthony, I've worked for a service provider now for a very long time. So I've kind of cut my teeth on Veeam software and a lot of the other enterprise technologies, that we're all used to hearing and seeing about, that Veeam obviously plays nicely with, from storage arrays to hypervisors and that sort of thing. And yeah, for the best part of a decade or more now, I've been building a big automation platform that sits over top of all of these technologies, and as such, kind of fell in love with Veeam and all of the APIs and the different products that you guys have built there, but also started driving them maybe a bit more different than, say, your typical system engineer might be, by writing scripts and things and, say, PowerShell, and doing more, I guess, operational DevOpsy type tasks. I'm actually trying to drive your software from a different angle, so using the APIs. And that's really how I found my way in the community, is this API thing. I'm probably known as kind of the API guy in a way, because everything I do is through leveraging your APIs. And at this point in time, I've pretty much touched every API that you've produced. And I like to create silly little demos that kind of highlight those technologies in a good way, and create demos and things, and then talk about them and share them with the community. So that's kind of where I'm at, I suppose. Like to blog about them, talk about them, on these sorts of things. So yeah, that's kind of how I've come to be in this wonderful Veeam community.
Yeah, and it's not just Veeam, right? Like obviously VMware community as well. You've got other sort of legs in, say, the pure storage ecosystem. And so basically, through your day job, you've been able to extend yourself out through the community. Is Veeam, what other community are you part of? Is Veeam, obviously I know Veeam's the main one, but would you say that you've kind of made your mark in other communities as well? I know that you're on, you go to the field days as well, the tech field days, which is obviously a big part of that as well. So you're kind of branching out there, right?
Yeah, and I am. That's right. Branching out to other communities like field days and things, and obviously through actually this community, that's how I got into field day community. So I got kind of nominated for and asked to kind of join that field day community through the Vanguard family, which has been really nice. But absolutely run in other circles, and like you say, the pure storage and VMware and stuff. It's when you start kind of pushing the boundaries of APIs or want to know how something works, often there's not well, historically, there hasn't been great developer documentation and examples and things. So you're often kind of paving the way and trying to work things out on your own. And sometimes you'll either come across a bug or an issue that hasn't been found yet because no one's really leveraged it in the way that they thought they would, or it just hasn't been quite tested well enough. So you're often talking to, people that you wouldn't normally have access to, even within VMware. I remember a few years back getting kind of the tour within VMware campus right before a VMworld, which was really neat. Kind of got taken, and that was on the back of talking about and demonstrating leveraging capabilities on the VMware API side of things. So this sort of things and getting out there and talking about things definitely presents opportunities that, certainly being down here in little old New Zealand, I don't get to all the conferences. It's a bit far to travel, but, it's certainly possible if you make the time. I mean, as I sit here now, it's what time is it? 12:15 at night, but make the time to do it. It's definitely worth it.
Exactly. Okay. Well, I've got a million questions I could ask you as well, but let's get to Kristof to basically, same question, Kristof. Like, what was your start in because you've taken a slightly different path from what I understand to get to, this community in terms of the V100. So just give a bit of background about yourself and what you do and, a little bit about your community experience.
Yeah. Compared to Ben, it's a complete different story for me. I'm just a rookie. I'm a Vanguard rookie. It's my first year I'm elected, and I'm pleased to be a part of this club of excellent people sharing a lot of knowledge. But I'm working in IT for more than 25 years. I had several roles in the past: system network administrator. Then I become an IT manager. So I had a big helicopter overview of the whole infrastructure. All things and backup, of course, was an important part of it. But I started using Veeam products. It was still named Fast SAP. So I'm quite
the very early days.
Yeah. I was one of the first using those products in Belgium, and we saw all the capabilities. It's still in the time when I asked for tape support, and I got then the answer: tape is that. We will never support tape. So
we will never do tape. We never do tape.
Okay.
Just like we would never do object storage and a few other things we said we would never do, but that's a different story.
Okay. Yeah, and then I started 5 years ago my own company with a business partner. We are a managed service provider with a strong focus on backup products. So we have several VMCEs, VMCA people certified laying around, and we built it in a self-service portal on Microsoft 365 on the backup for Microsoft 365 product. So comparing to Ben, also their API documentation, it's really sometimes it can be a pain in the ass to understand how to use a call and how to it was meant to be implemented. So that's more or less my history within Veeam and the community.
A lot of tinkering there, right? I think that's the essence of, I think when you realize before you become and know that you're in the community, before that you're kind of interested in tinkering, you're interested in trying to learn, but then you realize that through your own actions, through your own learnings, you can then actually share it and then give to the community. That's kind of the essence of what it is, right? And, I know that, Ben, you've done that great from the point of view of being so active on the community, the blogs that you put out. It's all about the art of the possible. And Kristof, for you guys to be working with the API as well, it obviously gives you guys an opportunity to dig in. And like you said, I mean, it's I always laugh at someone who says, "Oh, the API should be perfect. Where's our documentation? Why haven't we That's not the essence of what it is. I don't know why people expect it to be any different today, right? Because without that sort of, I guess, hole in that sort of API automation innovation space, there almost would be no innovation, right? Because everyone would be doing the same thing. So I don't know, Ben, what do you reckon? Is that a fair call? Do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent. I mean, I'm always going to fly the flag for kind of the whole developer experience. You think we curate other experiences from help documentation to even like the PowerShell documentation and things. And I think sometimes historically, and not just from a Veeam side of things, maybe developers kind of get a bad rap sometimes, certainly going back to VM worlds of old. going through the halls, just hearing system engineers talking about developers who want to spin up infrastructure and all the stuff. And now look, it's almost completely pivoted around. You look at what VMware are doing in that space now, it's almost all about the developer. So yeah, I mean, I think everyone's documentation could always be better. There's obviously some companies out there doing it very, very well, but they typically tend to be almost applications that are API first companies, things like payment gateways and things that are very, very mature in their developer experience, very mature in their SDKs and things. And they have to be, because that's the way that people consume them by default. There's no really GUI. Sure, there's some GUIs over top, but no one's sitting there with the e-commerce store manually typing in, credit card details and taking payments. So naturally, that experience has to be better. But I think over time, it's matured. I rewind to when I first started integrating with Enterprise Manager, was the first product I integrated with. It was like the Wild West. There was kind of a rough guide of XML-based API at the time, but there was coverage gaps everywhere, right? There was certainly no examples. But fast forward to something like Veeam, which Kristof will be familiar with, that's an API first product in terms of coverage, in terms of what you can do with the API now within the application. It's pretty much all there. Whereas previously there was some gaps because it was only to drive a certain aspect of a product, in terms of BNR, it was just to cover that enterprise manager space. So it's maturing over time. It's getting better and better. And I think, Veeam and other software vendors are listening to that and realizing that the real power is giving people the tools, certainly from an MSP perspective, or anyone that's interested in automation. I think it's it's critical to any software vendor these days.
That's it. And hey, Kristof, I wanted to ask a question, just changing tack a little bit before we get into the generative AI awesomeness that you guys have both been working on. What's your take on the Veeam community? Because you're new. Ben's been there for 4 years. He kind of knows that I've been around this community before. I've been at Veeam for 7 years and in the community for longer than that. So I've seen it grow from very small numbers to where it is today. What's your take on the Veeam community? What makes the Veeam community and the V100 different in your eyes?
Yeah. And in the past, I was a frequent flyer on the forums, of course. Also, there a lot of information could be already found. But when I got into the Vanguard program, when I got into the community, it was really overwhelming. There was a lot of information, a lot of experiences, and I think it's a huge advantage that we can learn from each other, that we can share our experiences, and it's a very broad ecosystem. So you cannot have all the knowledge in yourself or in-house. So having people with the same interests available to share your thoughts, that's really a huge benefit from the community, from my perspective. It's really all about collaborating and exchanging information. That's the real added value.
Yeah, and I think also it's what you'll find, Kristof, as well, is this episode is going out during the actual week that we're going to be in Prague. It's on the 2nd of November, right? So we're going to be at the V100 Summit in Prague. It's a whole new level of just awesomeness around the community, and the memories that you'll make at that event are pretty special, and that's what it's about as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I really love this community. I love making new friends and keeping friends for a long time now. So that's the best part of it. All right, let's crack into the cool stuff. Let's crack into the innovation. And what I love about this innovation, the fact that it is 2023 AI, year of AI, year of security. But like I said, for me, AI is much more prominent, much more exciting. OpenAI kind of set the path in terms of making AI almost a consumable, sort of non-hyped sort of consumer product. Not that it's there quite yet, Ben. But, what's your take, firstly, on the state of where generative AI is this year versus where it was in the last couple of years? Because I know that you've been interested in it for a while. I remember you getting really excited a couple of years ago when you managed to acquire some NVIDIA AI-specific video cards to work on.
Yeah, generative AI probably wasn't a term that was in my vocabulary prior to this year, but certainly interested in that AI space, that kind of NLP, that natural language processing thing. I think it was two Veeam-ons ago that I presented the data integration API and pulling out files from a backup effectively and doing kind of entity recognition and things from that. So naturally that's always been kind of interest. Obviously we did the image recognition and things, and then this kind of Gen AI thing hit the scene. I think it was December, I seem to remember, just prior to Christmas, right? OpenAI crash bang, like here's this ChatGPT thing that kind of blew up the world. And ever since then I've been absolutely hooked, and we are still super early. I mean, I look at how fast it's changed since I did VannyGPT 1, which we'll see, and VannyGPT 2, which I'm working on, and Kristof's got his own probably similar stories, I'm guessing. It's changing every single day. There's new support for different loaders of documents and a bunch of other stuff. The language models are getting bigger and better, and there's also competition now for the likes of OpenAI's models themselves. They were definitely the king of the castle when it came to generative, AI, big chat models. But there's plenty of open source ones, or ones with sort of less restrictive licenses on them now. And kind of what Kristof's angle, which he'll talk to, no doubt, is that whole, if you wanted to run it privately, because of course my project's leveraging the public OpenAI model. I'm sending all the data to them. Who knows what they're doing with them? I'm sure they say that they're not doing much to it, but with Kristof's model, it's quite nice too if you want to run your own private data. And I think that's key for a lot of businesses who are thinking about diving down into this space. But to summarize that, I think we're still really early on in the piece. I think all the tooling and that's still catching up. All of the people are still learning. People are working out how to optimize it for cost and performance, and all these things are still happening. We're very early on in the cycle, but it doesn't make it any less fun, that's for sure. What about you, Kristof? What do you think?
It's really... It's going very, very fast. When I open up a repository on GitHub, there are commits. Products are changing quite fast, and as Ben already said, there is also a huge competition. You should use this model. No, this is better. There is a lot of competition going on, and when you blink with your eyes, things suddenly change dramatically. So it's quite hard to get up to date and know, okay, am I now on the edge of the technology, or am I already lagging behind 1 or 2 weeks? Because it's really changing in 1 or 2 weeks. And that makes it really interesting. And as Ben said, you had end of last year, beginning of this year, that big ChatGPT thing, the big black box that could solve everything. We were quite interested to what is behind the curtain, what is really happening inside that box. And that's one of the reasons why I start digging around. Can I find information? And compared with, I will show it later on with the solution or the project of Ben. I was always looking into privacy. Here in Europe, privacy is really a thing. Privacy is important. ChatGPT was even banned for almost 1 month in Italy. So it's really a thing that needs some important information. That when you are putting data outside, where is it residing? What will happen to that data?
Yeah, and Europe's obviously got the GDPR situation there, which makes it a little bit more edgy. And I know that even with ChatGPT, some features aren't actually even enabled there by default, right? It takes a bit of time for them to get regulatory approval and put through. I just wanted to ask, Kristof, I'll start with you. If you were to simplify generative AI in a couple of sentences, what would your answer be?
A cloud with words and vectors. That will be simply said the way it works. You have your cloud with your words, and every word has a weight, as a vector, and then the generative the generation of the text will be depending on the weights of those words. I think Ben has a really good schematic on that, how it really works and how you can add on a base model, because there are a lot of generic models out there, how you can add your own information on that.
Ben, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think very similar. I thought, although I probably wouldn't restrict it necessarily to text. I mean, I think it's an umbrella term that we can use, like generative AI. We've got a model, we've got a computer system that's been trained on a big bunch of data to generate something. And sure, I think the most familiar thing we've been used to at the moment is this chat concept where we can put text in or ask it questions or get it to refine things. But, more recently with ChatGPT can't remember what the number is, but the vision model now coming out and it being able to interpret images, or, you've got DALL-E or Midjourney actually doing full on
stable diffusion.
Really nice. Stable diffusion, generating images for you. So anything that can kind of generate something from a model is kind of my rough definition of a, something we can prompt and get something out, be it text, image, video. There's some really interesting projects running under the video space at the moment, and changing Hollywood for the better probably in the near future.
It's not all about ChatGPT. Obviously, it's the most popular one that people know, but I think, and every man and his dog's trying to get a competitor now, and every day on Twitter I see, forget ChatGPT, here's a new kid on the block, and it's generally it's generally a troll or an influencer trying to get their influencers up, and it takes you to a certain GitHub repository that's you end up trying to play with it, and it's really, really crap. It's like this ain't an OpenAI killer, right? And as I've got, because I'm looking at my OpenAI, it's basically become, if I think about where I was maybe even 5 years ago, what interface I spend most of my time on, it would be vSphere or the API backend of vSphere or BVBR or whatever. Now, my number one primary platform that I interface with is ChatGPT. You know what I mean? It's just become that default, always open, always there, reliable source of actionable interactions that I have in my day-to-day, which is quite interesting. That wouldn't have happened if you said that was a year ago. Pretty crazy, right? Why don't we, and I think actually to lead in a very, very nice, awesome way, you can fall down a rabbit hole, so to speak, right, in this world. So is that a way to basically come in and actually, have a look at the slides and see a little bit about the projects that you guys are working on? Because I thought this is a really cool segue. So Ben, again, kick us off. You've already talked about Vanny. Now, Vanny is the Vanguard mascot. So you've actually taken Vanny. You looked after Vanny for a while as well, didn't you? He went to New Zealand. He went all over with you.
Yeah. He's been up mountains in the South Island and down to the lakes, and he's seen some good things. And then, so I got him after last summit, so almost a year ago. And then I gave him back in Miami, and he went down with, was it Beth, down to South America somewhere? Anyway, so he's a bird that gets around, let's say. And then we've now obviously got the other side. Is it what's the cat's name?
What's the cat's name? Maddie's going to kill me that I've forgotten the cat.
Alfred.
Is it Alfred? Yeah. We actually, it was funny, on the last show, we did ask the audience, and I guess we're going to ask the audience now. Please enter in who your favorite is. Is it Alfred or is it Vanny? It's Vanny, by the way. Anyway, it's all good. Yeah, it's all Vanny.
Anyway, so yeah, you're right.
We're digressing. We're digressing as part of the show. We could go anywhere. But take us down the rabbit hole of your Vanny GBT, because I think it's amazing. And then Kristof, before we go to yours, I want to ask you a question about something which we've talked about earlier, which I think will, bind the two together. So go ahead, Ben.
Cool. Yeah, so some of these are generic and some of these are specific to Vanny, but I think there's probably a lot of crossover. Me and Kristof have talked about it the last couple of weeks, of like very similar concepts, if not the same in some regards. So yeah, welcome to the rabbit hole. I got on the right slide. So for me, like you mentioned earlier on the show, I'm a lifetime learner. I always want to be learning about new tech. I'm excited about technology. I love integrating systems and things. So this was a natural thing I've become obsessed with. So I set myself some goals. I wanted to build a chatbot web interface, obviously very inspired by what OpenAI were able to do. And I wanted to use the Veeam knowledge-based data. Obviously, there's a large number of KB articles produced. There's some really good information in there. So I knew that was a really valuable data set for us to be able to use. I was going to use the OpenAI models. And I know, Kristof, you've obviously not used the OpenAI models, and you've used a completely different data set, which we'll let you talk about in a second. And then I wanted to learn about these things called vector embeddings, which we'll get to, and then also vector databases, which sort of are very much like traditional databases in a way in terms of what we can do with them, but they are very different as well. So that's a whole new world I haven't delved into. So Kristof, do you maybe want to talk about your data set specifically and the models you've used? Because I know your project differs quite a bit there.
There was already somebody first on the community forums, and he called Ben. So I had to take it in another way. I saw your post on the forums, and the weeks before your post, I was already playing around with some open models, mainly based on GPT-4All, which is an open source GPL2 licensed open model. And I was thinking, maybe I can do something for the community with that. But data rubbish in is rubbish out. Where I get my data, and of course, the main road would be let's grab some KB articles or do the best practices scraping site and use that as a data source. But I was thinking maybe we can do something with YouTube. There are a lot of very interesting and very educational videos lying around on YouTube. And since YouTube has an automatic subtitle generator using some Python scripting, I was able to scrape down all those texts from the videos. So that was my data source. I had some problems with that. I will come over later on when I share my project on that. But that was my data source to start with the GPT-4All model on my side.
Nice. So Kristof, question I wanted to ask you was in the community when we're all doing this in public, we've got ideas and it's a big world, and sometimes ideas collide, and you might, as a community guy, you might go out there, you might have an idea, but then you might get discouraged if you say, okay, well, I've got this really awesome idea around generative AI that I want to do. And then you go, oh man, this guy, Ben, he's done it again. He's doing everything out there. He's not giving me any chance to do this. How do you decide to still do it, right, and go ahead? I think it's a very interesting psyche that we go through as humans. So, you obviously adapted it to do something differently, but from a community perspective, what's your thoughts around that?
I wanted to give all the community members a broad overview what is generative AI, and there is also another road. Everybody is focusing on ChatGPT and the way that works. People start buying tokens or subscribing on the test trials and things like that. And I took it a whole different way and saying, okay, I don't want to send out any data outside. I want to do it completely inside in a secure way. And compared to that, since I'm quite limited on hardware resources, I don't get from those nice NVIDIA cards. They are too expensive, especially in those days where we still had very, very expensive NVIDIA graphic cards. I was searching for a model that was completely based on CPU usage instead of GPU usage. So I thought, okay, this can be added value to the community to share. Also, this is a possible solution, and just give it to the community that people can see the differences exact between the two solutions.
So the question without notice, what's the difference between running a model or running that generative AI application on a traditional CPU versus a gaming CPU, and then versus a specific AI configured card, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had too much direct experience with running models directly on GPU for generative AI purposes. I've done some other like vision type things. I mean, in terms of like CPUs versus gaming CPUs are fundamentally CPUs. Higher clock speeds and more cores ultimately wins out, right? So the faster your CPU, the faster it's going to generate. But from what I've seen, the types of models that we're running, CPUs just can't be compared to running them on a GPU. The resource just can't be comparable. But what is really neat is that models are being created small enough to run within CPUs or the constructs of a CPU, because that opens up a whole new world where all of a sudden this can run on a smartphone or a low-powered device at the edge for certain use cases, and they can be kind of fine-tuned down to that point. I think that's pretty exciting, that you don't need a data center full of GPUs to run it. I mean, I would hate to think how many GPUs someone like OpenAI are running. Obviously, they've now got Azure backing and a bunch of other stuff, or Microsoft backing, I should say. So I think it opens up a world of possibilities, and it makes it more accessible to anyone that wants to use it. Sure, if you want to run it at high speed at scale, you're probably going to need to invest in some GPUs. But sure, there's some models that are optimized for CPU too. But like the whole Bitcoin thing. The whole some coins were better on CPUs and some on GPUs. So I think it's pretty neat.
I guess the LLMs, they run on GPU to take advantage of the parallel processing, right? So, GPUs traditionally have a large number of cores designed for parallel processing, which enables them to handle computations like simultaneously, right? And that's also beneficial I think it's like, what is it called? Matrix operations. So, the amount of matrix operations that can be done. So it's almost like a CPU will do a certain process, almost in a single sort of 2D sort of way, if you can visualize it like that. And then a gaming CPU would do a lot of those in parallel, but then these specific LLM sort of GPUs, they'll do them in a 3D way, right? So the models become this three-dimensional sort of entity, which can be done all in parallel together. That's kind of how I've been told it works. Now, that might not be accurate, but that's kind of the way that I have best described it, or had it described to me as well.
Yeah, nice.
Cool. So get into it. So get in specifically into Vanny GPT-1 and then what you're doing with 2.
Yeah, cool. So Vanny GPT-1 and Kristof's project 2 uses this thing called retrieval augmented generation. So we've obviously heard about these models. They're obviously trained on pretty much the internet, right? These big, large sets of data. They're very good at knowing what a pirate sounds like, or how to write things in a bullet list. It understands language, but what it doesn't necessarily understand is the specifics of our data set that we're talking about. We want to be able to feed it very specific pieces of information rather than it kind of getting either hallucinating or getting confused with big bits of information that we just don't care about. So in essence, I'll move on to this slide. This is kind of the workflow. So you can see kind of on the left-hand side here, user asks a question, our little retriever here goes down to our specific knowledge base. And in my case, this is the Veeam KV articles. It does a lookup. We try and do effectively a search on these to find relevant documents that we think are a match for the user's query. We'll talk about how we do that in a second. And then what we do is we feed the question that the user put in, plus the documents we retrieved. Sometimes we can summarize those two to make it fit into a smaller prompt window, because these models do have a limited context that we can stick data into. So context being the number of tokens, the number of words, characters that we can kind of stuff in there. So we can't summarize, we can't put 4 whole books worth of documents and our question. It just won't fit. So we'd have to summarize things. So we feed the question and the documents to our LLM, and then it generates us a nice answer, and we're all happy. Hey, Kristof, it all just works perfectly every time. There's no hallucinations, and it always stays on track.
Hey, quickly, talk about hallucinations. Kristof, talk about hallucinations. What are hallucinations?
Hallucinations, sometimes complete rubbish coming out of the system. I've done some testing. Please explain me the VUL licensing, and I got something. He made up of the abbreviation of the Veeam Universal License. He made something virtual universe locating stuff like that. It's really complete off the road on when he's hallucinating.
And so fun fact too, when you're interacting with the API, specifically on OpenAI, and I'm assuming it's the same for your stuff, Kristof, is you can set what they call a temperature. And so the temperature is on a scale of pretty much 0 to 1. You can put increments of 0.25, 0.1, 0.5. The higher the temperature, the more creativity, let's say, the LLM will infer. So it might start going, I've got this. Don't worry. I know the world. I've got this answer. It'll just start making stuff up. So typically, when we're talking about very specific technical documents, temperature is almost at 0, if not 0.
Because you want to have a system that's correct, right? And you don't want to have a system that's creative in creating things itself. So that's the reason why temperature should be very low at this type of information.
You might want, if you're writing a poem or something funny, you might want a bit of more creativity. So being able to modify that value is important. So I'll quickly go through these, and then we can start talking about a demo, right? So the KV data set, much like Kristof's challenges, this was hard. I mean, if we punch into here's what a KB article looks like. We'll all be familiar with them. There was a bunch of junk in here, like the subscribe thing and a print button, and there's a whole form, feedback form. And when we're scraping the data and getting that data out, I didn't want that to be part of the data that I scraped. So I spent a lot of time running scripts to scrape and clean the data into a format that I want. And then I've actually stored them in a Mongo database that I can then query and retrieve and do things with, which we'll see. So that document there turns into something like this. So on the left-hand side is the markdown output, and then what you're seeing is a preview of it kind of re-rendered back into HTML. Much more clean, nice for us to deal with, and we can almost pass the stuff on the left straight to the LLM as it is, which is pretty neat. So this is in the MongoDB. We don't need to see that. We've all seen Mongo databases before, but I've also published this API on the internet. So if anyone actually wants to query the KB articles programmatically for whatever reason, it doesn't even need to be LLM based, they can actually query this. It's on the internet, and I'm constantly scraping the Veeam KB articles on a sort of hourly-ish basis. And this is kind of what we get.
I'm really looking forward to get that data in my system.
Yeah, good. Get at it. And so this is what we get back from the KB API. So I'm using this heavily with Vanny because I'm kind of querying things back and forth to pass text. Because you imagine I need to be able to query to get this text and send it to the LLM. So then we're going to get into embeddings, and this fundamentally is just a bunch of numbers. So what we do is we take those documents, those markdown documents that I created, and we embed them. So we either pass chunks or the whole thing, depending on the size of the document. Vanny GPT uses chunking 2.0, uses chunking heavily, whereas Vanny GPT 1 actually just embeds the whole document because they actually fit in the context windows really nicely. And what that means is, and this is a basic example from OpenAI, but is we take that text, we give it to a different model. It's not the ChatGPT model. And then what we get back is an array of numbers, 1,536 of them. And we use that to store in our vector database. And so when it's in vector space, we can do things like this. And the important note, actually, sorry, before I go on, is the last line there. So embeddings that are numerically similar are semantically similar, and that's important and kind of represented here. So you can see up the top right, we've kind of got things that are all about animals, canines and felines and meows and bovines and woofs. Down the bottom left, we've got something about American football. And so you think about that from a chatbot interface, or when we're trying to look these documents up, because what we're doing is we're embedding those KB articles. So we might have Postgres and databases and things down the bottom left, and we might have Microsoft 365 and a bunch of things up to the top right. And so when someone types in a query into Vanny GPT, we also embed that question, and we generate those same set of numbers, and then we ask the database, hey, someone's asked this question, I've got these numbers, what document or documents are the most likely matches, and then we can make some decisions in code to, choose the top one or the last four or whatever it might be, and make some decisions there to then feed to our LLM. And that's roughly what they look like. There's obviously a lot missing in the middle, but these are the sort of numbers that we're storing in the database. There's no necessarily text in there, but what we are storing with these numbers is metadata. We want to know what KB article it came from or what part of the document it came from, so that when we go to pass the actual text, we go and then look that up by the Mongo database or the API, and then pass that across to the LLM. Vector databases, very quickly, there's lots of them. I mean, this space is exploding even this year. There's been two trains of thought. This diagram is really nice. You've got basically net new greenfields databases that have been specifically built for vectors, and then you've got traditional, and in the open source space or in the commercial space, and then on the top side you've got traditional databases that are now building embeddings support into it. So you've kind of got these two streams, and the nice thing is there's choice, and there's free options and SaaS options and everything in between, so you can kind of, whatever fits your business or your project purpose best, you can use. This is what the Pinecone KB kind of nice dashboard looks like. It's really slick. There's a free tier, so you can kind of get started for no money. Vanny GPT runs on this. We're not doing it at scale. The app itself is just a JavaScript application. And so Vanny GPT 1 is leveraging just direct OpenAI calls that I'm doing with JavaScript, effectively TypeScript, across to OpenAI and querying the Pinecone database, all just with either the native SDKs that they provide, but just in script. Version 2 is similar framework in the front end, but we're actually using LangChain, and that's something that was definitely around when I did GPT-1, but wasn't necessarily on my radar, but that project is absolutely exploding. So my recommendation to anyone getting into any form of this is to start with LangChain, because all the building blocks are there, from a scraping and reading documents and chunking them and working with all of these databases and things. All the support's built into that, and you can either do Python or JavaScript. And we're doing some other sort of niceties, streaming the tokens in real time, which you'll see. So fundamentally, that's kind of the app that I built for mine. So maybe I'll stop talking, demo mine.
I reckon let's see it.
And then,
yeah, let's see it, Ben.
Yeah.
I reckon you've got about 2 or 3 minutes to demo it.
Easy. Right. I don't want to clock up too many OpenAI credits, right? So I'll limit it that way.
What's the address again? Just give me the address.
Localhost port 3001, so you can get to it.
Doesn't work here.
Yeah, okay. Bummer. So we can ask it a question, and this will stream off. And so we asked it a basic question: what version of Veeam backup replication supports Postgres? And you can see the answer was Veeam backup replication v12. And I can hover over this, and I don't know if you can see that in my browser, but probably not. But this links straight to our KB article. But because I've already scraped and cleaned up the KB, I can just embed it straight in the website. So now I've got the question, the answer, and the KB all nicely in here with all of its links. And if there were images in here, they'd be maintained. And we can ask it as many questions as you want. But you'll notice this isn't that sort of that chat chain where I can go, that was really good, but please give me a more concise answer. This is a very much ask a question, get an answer, ask a question. It's got no previous history context. So let's try some other things in here. So we can punch in, is there a migration utility for me to use to move from Microsoft SQL to Postgres? Can you provide me an example? And we'll ask Vanny, and we'll see what we get back. So there is a migration utility there. Hey, look, here's the command that you can use to run. And if I scroll down, you'll see that there's a bunch of these commands. So it's very easy. It's been very good at deciphering what my question was with this article that I've passed it and given us the answer. So that's kind of fun. And in the interest of time, I'll show you a bit of Vanny GPT-2 because it's still being refined. It's still very much an alpha product at best. But if we jump onto him, you'll notice he's a bit different. He's not quite as refined yet, but he works slightly differently. So let's ask him a question and hopefully this works. So I've said, apparently Microsoft is now metering Teams message data. How do I apply for this? And is there anything additionally to do to ensure my Teams chat messages are going to continue to be protected? We'll send this away and this will stream. So you'll notice this is now streaming the response as it's being generated at LLM rather than just waiting for the whole thing to come back. And it's kind of given us that back. And if I go, hey, that's nice, but can you summarize that for me? I'll actually get a slightly different answer back. And it's remembered what we were just talking about. So you can see now it's kind of given us something back, and it's modifying and creating these links in real time, which is fantastic.
And is that LangChain? That's caused the difference there? Yeah,
LangChain's building up this Q&A chain for us in the background, but we are doing some prompts. So the prompt that we're giving it is, hey, you've been giving this new document, kind of the person asked this original thing, here's what you've been talking about, give us the answer back. So every time the sort of context window is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the trick, right? Trying to keep this under control is difficult. So yeah, it's pretty neat the way that it works. I think it's fantastic, and the future for it is this is currently doing the KB articles, but I've currently got it scraping in the background all of the Help Center documentation, so it's going to have access to all the Help Center stuff. So it'll know more, but trying to get the right answer too can be difficult when it's got more data, because what document do we pick? Because a lot of those documents are going to be similar, so it's a hard task to kind of get right. Yeah.
All right. So let's swap over to Kristof, and let's see what you've done in the space as well. And you've got about 3 or 4 minutes as well, Kristof.
Yeah, no problem. We can easily go through it. I'm sharing my screen. So I took a complete other route. I'm using the ChatGPT for All model, which is more or less a quite off-the-shelf system, also with LangChain embedded. And I can fed it a lot of different file types immediately from there. The main advantages from a ChatGPT for All model is, it's free and open source, but but it runs 100% offline. And also in terms of privacy and security, portability, it's a complete different story compared to those public services. How I got my data and compared to Ben's project, this is really just a POC. It's what is technically possible. But I was just scraping out some YouTube videos, and this is the raw text I got from a YouTube transcript. And even there, YouTube transcriptions are not that perfect. So it was hard to me, and I had to write some dehumidifier functions because there are a lot of yes and uhs and ahs, and when there is background music, you see the indication of music. Yeah, that has to be get out of, because otherwise all those words become very frequent into the database and will heavily have an impact on the results on that. And then I was able to this is just some Python code to scrape whole channels. I took the Tag Friday bytes. I took a lot of data, and I just put it in that system. When we go to the system here, and I can show you, this is really running on my PC, and it's a PC I bought and I built myself to play Flight Simulator, but until now I wasn't able to do one single flight. That was the main reason I bought a new PC. It's running just on CPU, 6 cores, and then I can easily give another question into this system, and you will see that it will eat up all my resources. Here we go, and now it's thinking. It's 100% CPU. We don't see any GPU load at all. It's running. It will take you a decent amount of time. I don't have that fancy NVIDIA. It's called H100 cards. I thought it's just running on a generic CPU. You can run it in your data center. If you have a spare server, you can run it there as well. But as you see, it's thinking. It's completely written in Python, also not the fastest program language out there. But this is my first question. What is a Veeam Universal License? And then we got some text. It's another benefit, and that's very important when you are talking about sources. It gives you the source. What was the source that he fetches his event from? My second question is now processed. Backup World Day was a global event that took at Friday 2020. To remind people, so it's not that hallucinating, but yeah, it's far from perfect. That's more or less, a possible way we can.
Kristof, you scrape the text from the YouTube channels you were saying, then your source document there is a World Backup Day 2022.txt.
Yeah.
So it's
a title of that video. I used every video as a video title, and I used that title. And you
convert it to a text.
And I converted it to text. So I scraped the text. I put it there because I had to know where my answer was coming from. And every video has a title, and that's the reason why it's the text file. But I also
interesting there that I was going to say. Sorry, it's rather interesting that it's Backup Day 2022, and then it's quoting Backup Day 2020 there. So there's a little bit of hallucination happening there that I can see, or am I incorrect there?
Yeah, or I should check the transcript and see if there was some text going on of the history in that thing. So yeah.
And what big database are you using, Kristof?
The database.
Yeah, is it a memory one, or are you actually storing the embeddings? Like when that app loads, are you doing the embeddings on the fly?
I store the embeddings. You see, I've stopped sharing my screen, but I have the opportunity to ingest the data, and then it starts calculating, and it stores it. It's comparable to the Pinecone system that we can use as a public service.
Excellent.
Nice.
Hey, it's really cool. I kind of feel that we need another hour, maybe 2 hours to go through a lot of this stuff here, because it is so cool and fascinating. And actually, to be fair, just to dive into the language that you guys are using, because it is so different to what I think a lot of people outside of the space are used to in terms of the chunking, the vector databases, Pinecone, all the different stuff that you're talking about, right? But obviously, it's very intriguing. I mean, the one question to finish off. The practicality of something like this for the community, where do you see it, Ben? Like, what's the practicality here? What are you trying to gift and get the community to basically be aware of here with the project?
I think I'm just trying to open people's eyes to the technology more than anything. we still have some challenges, as we talked about earlier on the show, in terms of how to deal with this at scale, cost effectively, performance wise. There's a whole heap of privacy concern. We didn't even talk about the people were effectively trying to hijack these things by prompting, trying to get it to do things that it shouldn't. So the security aspect of this to kind of break out of its bounds. I think the communities around the world that are building the Lang chains and all these models are working as fast as they can to try and solve these things. I'm just trying to highlight the tech really more than anything. I think we're still a long way from, well, not a long way, but we're a way of, I certainly couldn't afford to publish this by myself online. My OpenAI credit would fill up very, very fast. And I've got some GPUs in the data center, but they probably need to be for customer workloads, not delivering Benny. But who knows? Maybe I'll put it out there for a short period of time. Totally.
And what about you, Kristof? I was going to say, Kristof, same question.
We are on the same page there, just to show what is technically possible to run this 100% in-house. And then you see the limitations in terms of speed, hallucinations, things like that. But as Ben already mentioned, things are evolving that fast. I think within this and let's say 6 months, this is a complete different story.
Yeah. And I think it's exciting to think about where these could land within products themselves. And I think we've seen some of that in the 12-run kind of release, right? And that's kind of starting that journey. And I'm sure the Veeam engineers that are working on that have found the same challenges that we've kind of struck or talked about here. But as the models get better and more cost effective to run, and we haven't even talked about agents, being able to reach out in real time and have that prompt. Actually, we might say, give me a summary of my Veeam 1 alerts, and it could then in real time reach out to the Veeam 1 API and grab those things and bring it back in and summarize those for us, or cancel things, turn alarms on and off. And that's the future, being able to interact with our tooling in a different way. And you mentioned before at the start of the show about your workflow, about how much you're using ChatGPT, but you think about how inefficient that is from a process. You're constantly copying things in and out of that system.
Yep.
If we could start embedding them in systems and just having them at our tooltips, that's the future of our jobs and our roles and
that is actually quite scary, isn't it? Like you could almost just like I'm envisioning a future where you walk in as a backup engineer and you just go, hey, Vanny GPT, just tell me how the backups are going, and then it tells you, and then it basically goes, oh, by the way, I had a failure last night. I'm going to rerun this. I'm going to actually run a validation test. I'm going to do a data lab for you. And I'm going to give you all the results. And by the way, I realized that you were potentially, lost some data there. This user has screwed up a database. I'm going to restore it all for you. So just as a backup guy, what are you doing? You're just basically interacting with this technology. So do you need to be there? It's actually, on one hand, extremely exciting, and on the other hand, absolutely scary as well. But I lean on the excitable side. I don't know about you guys. I think you embrace the technology. It's a cool time to be alive. Hey, Kristof, Ben, we have to cut it short there. We've got to cut this episode. This has been episode 2 of the V100 show. It's been great to be on. And this is my first 2 episode stint. The next show, I don't know who's going to host it, but it'll be someone, it'll be a surprise, and also the people that'll be on. The one thing that you will know, it will be someone like Ben, someone like Kristof, who's in the community and doing great things and innovative technology. So thanks for being on the show, Ben and Kristof, and we're going to catch you next time on the V100 show.